Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rational Female Podcast. And we got a great setup for you guys today. I am hosting my first ever live debate / discussion. I've got the usual panel of non-feminists, and then we are joined with two guests who both identify as either feminist or pro-feminist. So before we start, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, and then we will be letting people each speak. I will not be sharing my thoughts. I'm just going to be moderating this. And yeah, I will just let's see how things go. So let's start with Blueorange 22. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Thomas. I am a men's rights activist, anti-feminist, and anti-misandrist.
Okay. Next, Women Against Feminism, please.
Shit.
You're muted. Love, you're muted.
Hi, my name is Jana. I don't really label myself, but I can give my reasons for not being a feminist. Are we allowed to do that now, or is this later?
No, just a brief introduction. Thank you.
Okay, so you don't want to know why I'm not a feminist now?
Let's just move on. So Tim, next, please.
Okay, next. Tom, okay. Tim.
So
sorry.
I'm Tim Goldich. I call myself a gender equalist. Been at it for 40 years.
Cool.
Hi, my name's Andrew. I'm representing in support of feminism today. That's how I'll phrase it.
I'm Alex, and I'm an intersectional feminist.
Cool. So who would like to start us off for why our topic today is around male privilege? So what do we think of male privilege coming from whichever position that we hold?
All right. I did the first introduction, so I guess I'll jump in. Alex and Andrew are from the UK. I'll try and lean more towards the UK, but obviously I'm American, as is Tim. But the notion that men are privileged in the West today is absurd when you look at pretty much every socioeconomic statistic. In education, boys are behind. Boys get lower grades for the same work. Boys are less likely to go to university. In the US, men have less scholarships available. Men are more likely to be unemployed. Men face discrimination in hiring. In Canada, for example, men are by law discriminated against in hiring for federal jobs. Men die younger but get less healthcare research. In the US, boys have their genitals mutilated when they're born and have the majority of erogenous tissue sliced off their body. Men are punished more severely for the same crime. Male victims of domestic violence aren't taken seriously. Some countries have higher pension ages for men. Some countries have male-only conscription. And when I say men are not privileged, people will often say, well, most CEOs are men and most kings are men, most presidents are men. But that's 1% or less of the general population. So if you go to the UK, if you go to Canada, Australia, the United States, and you take 100 men and 100 women at random off the streets, on average, the men will be economically in worse shape than the women, amongst other things too.
Okay, would we like a rebuttal to that from anybody?
Well, okay, rebuttal.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, Jana, go ahead.
Continue.
Okay,
Continue.
I wouldn't really rebut, but I would say, so my take on it is, in terms of my anti-feminism, I am a little bit intersectional. So I don't have a problem with intersectionality as a concept or anything like that. However, I do believe in privilege. I do believe that different groups have privilege. I do believe that, let's say, men have privilege and women have privilege. I believe both have different sets of privilege, and all different groups have different types of privilege in a sense. Some groups have more or less. So I understand the feminists want to say men have more privilege. And I think that is rooted, I'm not sure, but I think that is rooted in the idea that men have more money than women, and the ultimate privilege is money or whatever. The problem or mistake I think that feminists make in terms of intersectionality when it comes to gender is that they simplify it like they do with all other groups. And what they're not recognizing is that men are not any type of isolated group that exists on their own. So men are part of families, men and women are so interconnected that I don't think it's possible for them to have a separate set of privilege with respect to women as a group. Meaning you can apply such ideas to race, where these two people could like live in their own different corners. You can apply that when you talk about nationality. You can apply that with respect to classes like the first class or the third class, or like the third world versus the first world. But with respect to men and women exist throughout all classes. They exist throughout all races. They exist. So for me, I see that men and women are too interconnected for their privileges to not benefit each other, which means that we cannot really live in a world where we say just men have privilege and women have this privilege. I think men and women, because we are interconnected, we use whatever privileges we have to benefit each other. Now, there are cases where this privilege, whatever, may be a problem. But again, it comes back to, let's say, my problem with feminism as a whole is that if you argue that you want equality, if you argue feminism from an equality perspective, then you have to argue it as an egalitarian, which means that you have to attack both male and female privilege. You can't just have it one way. You can't just say you hate male privilege, but you don't talk about female privilege. So the focus being on male privilege is also a problem, because we have to, that balance must exist. And that also comes from men and women being interconnected. So that's my take on it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate Thomas. He did a nice download on the statistical facts of the matter. And Jana, I appreciate, you're bringing up balance. So I would say, to talk about male privilege, a dubious concept, but if we are going to talk about male privilege and we're not going to talk about female privilege, then we're going to take male privilege as if it stood alone, then we're engaged in a lie of omission. We're looking at half of gender reality as if it were gender reality in its entirety. When we do that, when we look at male power and female victimization as if they stood alone, as if that, the facts and truths of male power and female victimization, as if they're presented as if they represent gender reality in its entirety, then that's a half-truth. And a half-truth is a whole lie. Very destructive. That's my basic complaint about feminism, is it's a kind of ideological dictatorship. It says you can go out and look at the world, but you have to look at it from this spot. You can't go over here and look at it. For example, you can look at a husband as bringing home the bacon. You can look at him as privileged. You can look at him, you can look at all the positives inherent in the male experience, but never the negatives. You can look at all the negatives inherent in the female experience, but not the positives. So from a feminist perspective, the husband, he gets to go out into the world where he's privileged to get out, and he's privileged to be fulfilled by some career, and he brings home the bacon, and through this he is economically empowered. Well, that's a lie of omission, because if we go over here against the rules and look at it like from this position, now we see a man who lacks the innate value that a woman has as lover, as a spouse, as a parent. So he must compensate. So he must go out and earn his family's love. And every hour that he devotes to earning his family's love leaves him with one fewer hour in which to be with his family's love. And one day in a court of law, a family court, that may be used against him to reduce him to a mere visitor of 4 days a month. If we're going to look at gender reality, we have to look at both sides. Femalism, let me make this one last point. In the realms of gender conflict and complaint, gender activism and advocacy, gender ideology, gender defining, gender issues, gender studies, gender politics, gender anything, there is feminism on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's kind of like nothing, officially anyway. Nothing that's going to be printed in Time magazine. So I consider feminism a kind of ideological dictatorship in which the feminine alone dictates what is true and what is not true in all matters gender related.
Okay, sounds very interesting. Yeah, so somebody just said humanism. That's what that idea sounds a little bit like. So now
I'd
let's
accept
see
that.
what the feminists, if either of them have anything they would like to say in response to anything that has been said. Sorry, I've muted you, so you need to unmute.
Don't.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I don't reject male suffering. I don't reject the fact that, you know, all the statistics you can name about men taking their own lives, or the emotional suffering men go through when, you know, when they in the world of work that Tim talked about. I don't believe all men have financial power. I don't believe all men have political power. I don't believe all men are the god and king in their own home. I don't believe any of that stuff. And I don't think feminism says any of that stuff. Maybe some feminists do. Maybe there's a lot of discourse and an ideology around feminism that kind of pushes an extreme line, but then the same is true for any ideology. Same is true of men's rights activism as well, or any other kind of ideology you want to name. I think for me, the concept of male privilege and the reason why feminism exists in the first place, I think the context of patriarchy is very important. And I know that's like a bit of a trigger word for a lot of people. But my understanding of patriarchy is that it is a system that either evolved or was deliberately designed. My perspective is that it probably evolved sort of sociologically over time. It's a system that benefits a sort of hyper-dominant masculine characteristic. So that is true. That is damaging for both men and women, right? If you're a man and you're not a very masculine man, or a very ambitious or driven man, or a very sort of, I don't know, like confident or like thick-skinned man or whatever, like patriarchy doesn't work for you either, right? But the whole thing about patriarchy is it's based on dominance, hyper-masculine characteristics. I've just sort of created that term out of nothing, but like it's the kind of like, it's taking the concept of masculinity, which is like this kind of, you know, traditionally seen as ambitious, driven, power sort of oriented, full like having loads of agency, being like more physically powerful, being more psychologically powerful, like the idea of masculinity, and like making that into kind of an extreme, like a real overbearing kind of system where only the most sort of dominant alpha kind of men succeed, right? That's my understanding of patriarchy. And so in that system, that outcomes of that system produce generally men in positions of power and influence, men in positions that are more likely to be paid higher wages, men who commit violence more likely to commit violence against each other and women, and are probably more likely to, historically anyway, to have gotten away with that. And also this whole idea of male privilege is very much, you know, it's a historic concept and a global concept. It's not, you know, I'm not going to be talking just about the UK. Like if you look at a lot of societies around the globe, you have very hyper-patriarchal societies and hierarchical societies globally, and definitely historically. And I think, you know, of course, yes, women are catching men up in lots of important areas within the UK, within different places. But that's a very, and to my mind, that's quite a recent development, and obviously that's a good thing. But I think, male privilege is like, it's basically the system is sort of tipped towards rewarding and encouraging a certain type of masculine behavior. And unless you are good at that, you're going to be sort of left behind or like damaged by that, right? And that's true of men and women. But I think men benefit more, not necessarily in healthy ways. Like they benefit materially, they benefit in terms of having more agency, feeling safer, all that stuff. Like those three kind of things, I think, are the general ways in which men sort of benefit. But obviously, like in terms of like our mental health or our like our safety in terms of the types of jobs we have to do or the hours of work we have to do, of course, we suffer under the system of patriarchy just as much as women do. But I think patriarchy as a concept is specifically designed or, sort of has come about to favor a certain type of very male-centered masculine energy. That's my kind of idea. So, Alex, what's your...
No, it's definitely a certain type of, from my point of view, a certain type of white man as well. This is why I'm intersectional. It's like I'm... Oh, can I hear myself? No, I can't. Okay. For me, it's men's mental health is one of the reasons I actually am a feminist as well, because there are women who want other men to be able to be emotional and vulnerable. And I am being anecdotal here. The statistics I don't have, so I am going to be anecdotal, but I've always been brought up in a society that says, Alex, you can't be emotional unless it's anger or frustration. You cannot be emotional. You are weak if you show any sadness, or you're not as strong as the guys in the gym, or you're not as cool as other men. It's the sense that anything that's not this like macho person is a weak man, even though it's actually you're stronger when you're technically more emotional, because emotions, all of them, are valid for every human. And I just think that, sorry, I saw someone's hand. I just think that it is patriarchy that makes it so that men can't be fully like happy individuals. The fact that we can't open up means that our unaliving rate is higher. Women, they can be as fairly open as they want to be with their female friends, and it's obviously men who feel like they can be more emotional, more weak, as patriarchy likes to call it, with their female friends, but not with the other male friends that they have. They have to be like, you can't be... Men feel like, I mean, from my point of view, men feel like they can't be weak with other men, because then you're a beta, or you're not as strong or emotionally like resilient. And I think it's patriarchy that enforces that for men. And men's rights people, I struggle, unless it's potentially in, I don't know, divorce or childcare, or because obviously paternity leave is not something that America has. They don't even have paternity leave. Well, not like federally or state endorsed anyway. Well, actually, I'm not sure. The Americans can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Other than that, men, from my point of view, we have all the rights that we could ever want. The world is, for the most part, run by men, and the idea that women have better scores in school doesn't like signify to me that the problem is now solved and it's going too much in the other direction, way towards women now. It just doesn't, because no matter what we think, from my point of view, men still hold systemic power. There's more male heads of state, more male heads of government. I think subconsciously there are definitely going to be some men that just they won't want to admit it, but there are probably some men who just, they won't see a female opinion as like valid, even if they don't want to think that way. They just don't, and I think it's because of upbringing. And I'm a feminist technically because I'm also for men. I'm just not a men's rights activist in the context of being anti-feminist. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, I can think of a response to that. When you said boys getting lower marks in school isn't proof that the problem has been solved. I'm presenting that as a new problem. And it's not just that boys are getting lower marks in school, it's that boys are getting lower marks in school for the same grade. And there are studies that show, my favorite study on this is actually from Dr. Camille Terrier, a woman from the MIT School of Economics, showing that when evaluators don't know the gender, then all of a sudden the gap disappears. But when they do know the gender, boys get lower grades for the same work. And I think we have a surge of teachers in their 20s and 30s who are self-described feminists to the point of possibly being self-described misandrists that treat boys unfavorably. And now we've seen this bleed over into university where men are vastly underrepresented, especially at the graduate level. And men under 40 don't earn more than women. They earn less. They are behind. I'm kind of repeating myself from the beginning in every socioeconomic factor. But the cause, I think, is people have this perception of male privilege, and so they think they're correcting it, but they're correcting it so far that they're now creating a new problem. So it's not just that, oh, this is proof that we've solved misogyny and we've solved discrimination against women. We've now created a new misandry. We've now created a new sexism, a new bigotry, a new gap. We've created a new inequality. And if you look at men and women under the age of 40, I think the gap between women and men is the equivalent of the gap between the middle class and the working class. And the younger you go, the worse it gets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
You don't have to speak in order. You can comment if you want
Yeah.
to, just you never know.
You know, I
So you don't have
wanted
to follow
to
the rule.
respond to both Andrew and Alex, especially with what they said about patriarchy. So when Andrew was speaking, he mentioned patriarchy and he described what he sees patriarchy is, a sort of power system. It is built on aggression and men fighting each other, let's say, to reach the top. We have this systematic patriarchy, as you would describe, right? So for me, this brings the argument back to a labels issue, right? Because let's say we look at patriarchy as you both described, and we say that is nature. That is human nature, in that there are actual physical nature reasons why the structure of the world is the way it is. And I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying that you are wrong to fight it. I also agree with fighting it. But the aggression system, the system of aggression that we live in, which you spoke about, Andrew spoke about it, with respect to this forms societies where we have hierarchies and we have, let's say, the global south, and we have colonialization, and all of these things come from what you're describing as patriarchy. But this system is built on the fact that aggression actually causes death, which takes you out of life. It's a natural system that no one can avoid. However, we as humans have this type of human nature, and we have another type of human nature, which is what y'all are presenting as more logical and good and better for society, a more equal type of system, right? So it makes sense for us to fight this, but calling it patriarchy sort of takes away from the fact that it is not actually men's fault. It was not designed by men. It was not, to me, this system doesn't really have anything to do with men. It is simply a system that is from nature. And on the flip side, what you would say is the more feminine approach to it or whatever is also something that comes from nature. And I agree with fighting for that. But my question is, why can't we just call that fight egalitarianism? Why do we have to label this patriarchy? Why do we have to use these sort of labels and not acknowledge that, you know, we are interconnected, genders are interconnected. We both contributed to this system. We both contributed to the system of aggression that we have that caused all of the hierarchy and the, let's say, colonialization and I don't know, the systems that we have today that you described as patriarchy. I don't understand why we're labeling this as patriarchy and not just something that comes from nature, which was produced by both men and women. And the flip side would be something as well that can come from both men as women, as you two sort of show, because you two are men who don't agree with patriarchy, who see, you know.
Yeah, I think you're, you know, like I think you're I sort of agree with you on most of that. I think the thing about I'm just using the term patriarchy because that's the term, that has been created to describe this issue. I think with egalitarianism or humanism, well, I don't know about humanism, but egalitarianism or merit, the thing that troubles me about that slightly is because, like, the other aspect of feminism that I think exists is to highlight how these systems impact women specifically. And the reason it exists to do that is because otherwise those things would not get talked about. Like, that's the whole point of feminism. Like, I can't remember the book, but sorry.
Are you talking about everyday feminism by?
No, I'm talking about the problem that cannot be named. Anyway,
the feminine mystique.
That goes back to Betty Friedan. That's
anyway,
the feminine mystique from 63.
The purpose of feminism is to talk about how women are impacted by society. Women specifically.
But do we talk about how men are?
Exactly.
Do we talk about how men are impacted?
The whole point is that as a society, we focus, or have historically focused, mostly on men's concerns. And you can see that in stuff like science, where it's the whole idea of the default male. It's like if you look on the human body diagram of muscles and skeletons, it's a man's body, right? Like it's that whole default male, the default to what men think, feel, and want. And that comes back to positions of power. And I noticed a few people have spoken about how, like, the elite don't represent all men, which of course they don't, but they do have more power over more people. So if more people in power are men, then those men have a disproportionate amount of power over everybody. And so that filters down.
Let me step in here.
Historically,
kind of got skipped and
well, hang on. Historically and socially,
I'll let him finish it.
Can you wrap up here?
Historically and socially, the focus has been on men. Feminism exists to refocus and highlight issues specific to women, and that's why patriarchy is named as patriarchy, because it's saying this is a system that benefits men mostly. It's in terms of it being like of giving them positions of disproportionate influence, and therefore what impact does it have on women? And we should talk about that, and we should focus on that. So that to me is why it's patriarchy, not just about egalitarianism, because I think egalitarianism encourages the kind of meritocracy fallacy that we all live in a meritocracy and everyone's equal anyway, and we should all just accept that and everything's fine. But feminism, I think, rejects that concept. It's like, we don't live in a meritocracy. Women are harmed and disproportionately affected by patriarchal systems, and we need to talk about that, and we need to do something about that.
Okay, can I get in now?
Yeah. Go on, Tim.
All right. The big irony that I see, it's the men that are so sure that females have no power. It's the males that are most blind to female power are the males that are most enthralled to female power. I see two men with no male point of view whatsoever. I see two men that have only a feminist perspective on all things. No sense of what your own perspective is. For example, patriarchy. One of feminism's great powers is the power to define the terms. Patriarchy, from a politicized male perspective, that's all men everywhere set in fierce competition in their efforts to perform, achieve, and succeed their way into having what women are empowered to demand of them. That's a male perspective. I'm not saying it's the whole story any more than feminism is the whole story, but I am saying that from a politicized male perspective, there's a whole other world of fact and truth out there of which you two know nothing. Patriarchy. Hold on. I gave you plenty of time.
Yeah, but can I just reject that assertion that we know nothing?
No, you cannot just reject that
female power and that we have.
Sorry, Jen. Right, Tim, finish your point. Right, gents. Tim, finish your point, and then Andrew, go on. Please try and talk faster as well. Okay. So Tim, finish your point, please. On.
Well, I'll continue. So patriarchy, that's feminist defined as a standalone force, the power, the evil power that controls the human world. And I will say that to the degree that man dominates, woman manipulates in equal measure. Woman has managed to take total control over the entire gender belief system. Let me tell you something about what if the evolution of human parenting driven by women is the evolution of human empathy, social consciousness? What if woman's behind that whole thing? What if that's female power? And if that's true, if that theory is true, why are your feminists not screaming it from the mountaintops that woman was responsible for the evolution of human empathy? That woman is responsible.
That from the mountaintops.
Okay.
There's a lot of books written by feminists about that exact topic.
But
what books? Sorry.
There's a lot of literature written by feminists.
To my knowledge, that theory has been discredited, and Lloyd DeMause has been canceled because it represents female modes of power, not women wielding male modes of power, not queens, not female potentates, but this is women. This is a female power among many others: beauty power, sexual power, moral authority.
Moral authority?
Power. Absolutely. All the way back to the Vestal Virgins.
100%.
We look to women to see what's right and what's wrong. You certainly do. You've read only feminism. You've never read a Warren Farrell book. I mean, you've never read anything from the other side.
I'm sorry, but you're making a lot of assumptions and assertions about what we've read and what we
you're
done.
To be fair, actually,
Andrew and Alex,
are they false assumptions?
Right, Corey, 1 second. Andrew and Alex, have either of the two of you actually read any anti-feminist or MRA literature?
I've definitely.
Have you read The Myth of Male Power?
Yeah, I do read The Spectator, which is very anti-feminist, for example.
That's not what I was asking. What I was asking is, have you read any actual books? So, for example, I've read about maybe 10 books. So there's The Myth of Male Power, there's Christina Hoff Sommers, there's Camille Paglia, there's The Feminist Lie. I have also read feminist books. I'm just asking that because Tim made the accusation.
Yeah, but hang on.
1 second. Tim made the assumption that the two feminists are not familiar with any anti-feminist books. I just wanted to ask that because it's very true. And I think that it's important for people to look at both sides before you make an informed decision.
But I have to say, though, Andrew and Alex make a good point. It was wrong for Tim to assume that, I will say. Because even if they haven't, you shouldn't have assumed that.
Sure. So
let's say I'm asserting it. Is it false? No, it's not false.
Okay, Andrew, please go say what you want to say. Go on.
Okay, so whether have I read any specifically men's rights activist books? No, I haven't.
Nor have I.
So you've never actually read the position. You're not familiar with the anti-feminist position, then, in terms of actually consuming any literature that describes that position. That's what.
Well, I'm definitely familiar with the anti-feminist position. The thing is, I'm not rejecting what a lot of you are saying about men, and I said that at the beginning. The reason I'm getting slightly frustrated is I feel like you're framing our position, quote unquote, in such reductive terms. You're sort of saying we're enthralled to women, we have no perspective of our own, all that stuff. It's like, I didn't say women are like completely victimized and have absolutely no power.
That is the feminist position. I will just
no, it's not.
Actually,
it's not the women have no power.
It's the women are victimized by men. That's the feminist position, just to make.
Well, that's your perspective.
No, it's not my perspective.
That's your framing of the feminist position.
Actually, right now, I agree with Andrew.
Well, the
Yeah,
feminist position is women are victims and men are
No, well,
perpetrators.
that's not.
Have you
That's,
read?
I don't
Have you
agree
read the
with that
feminine
perspective.
mystique?
I
Have
don't
you
agree with
read
that
Say that.
perspective
effects
of
or
the feminist position. I think
backlash?
that's a
Andrew didn't say
reductive-
that. Andrew didn't
that's a
say that.
reductive Position.
Okay, right. Everyone's talking at once. Alex, please say something. Go on. What are your thoughts?
I've got no. I don't want to interrupt. That's I. Even though it's definitely an interesting topic, the anti-feminists have obviously read a lot more than I have, and I have to admit I've only really read mostly because I have ADHD, so I find I've gotten into audiobooks, which is why I've read or listened to Everyday Feminism by Laura Bates. That's it.
Yeah,
Oh, Laura Bates is horrible.
Yes, she is. Yeah, go
And
on.
Men Who Hate Women by the same person.
That's also by Laura Bates. Yeah.
Literally just those
Just
books
not biased at
convinced-
You
all.
should read The Feminine Mistake. I should stop talking. Sorry, someone else talk.
I want to ask Alex and Andrew about a very. I want to ask you guys about a very specific case, and if I can, am I able to share a screen, Zarina?
I'd rather not. Because
Okay,
it's too much
okay.
effort.
Are you guys familiar with the Alex Skeel Jordan Worth case?
No.
Okay, it was 9 years ago in Bedfordshire. Jordan Worth was the girlfriend. Alex Skeel was the boyfriend. She was jailed for 7.5 years. She did 3 years and 9 months. She would pour boiling water on him. She would stab him. And then when he would get back from hospital, she would then stab boiling water on his wounds. Burn him. She would restrict him from medications. She would restrict him from food. And when the police found him, he was days away from death. Now, I know that's not the typical male victim. I know that's in a very, very, very extreme case. But something I would criticize British feminists for is their refusal to recognize the fact that men can be victims of domestic violence from women, and that British feminists call for overly lenient treatments of women who commit domestic violence against men. How would you react to that accusation?
Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I guess I don't discard the fact that men can be victims of domestic. Can we say that? The whole
Yeah,
DV?
go on, yeah.
DV? Domestic violence. Obviously, that's the case. That does happen. It's just statistically not, in my opinion, not as important. Mostly because of testosterone. Men are a lot stronger. They can literally put a woman in hospital for most part. There are obviously women who can do that with men, but it's just the statistics show that this is not a women against men problem. It's a men against women problem. But so I'm only giggling because it's preposterous to me that we can think about it in a different way.
But do you think that the women who do it should go to prison?
Yes, of course. Like, it doesn't matter who's doing it. I think the whole 3.5 years thing is because of good behavior, right? That's just a custodial thing.
Yeah, I think this is the problem with the framing of this, because it's like I don't know where you're getting this. Zarina's disappeared. But yeah, I don't know where everybody's getting this idea that feminists don't believe that abuse against men can happen, or that feminists don't believe that men can suffer, or that men can be poor, or whatever. Like, of course, all those things are true. Like, absolutely. And like Alex said, there will be plenty of cases where women have certain powers or certain things that they're good at that they can use to kind of gain leverage in the world. Like, of course, that's true, right? Like, I think the point I was trying to make at the beginning about patriarchy, and I think the point Alex was trying to make about the statistics, is that like if you look at specifically positions of power, political and business power, and you look at violence against men and women, and you look at certain areas like work after childcare, and how most female-dominated industries are the lowest paid industries, for example, stuff like that. On the big picture, on the big scale, men are the ones that mete out the most violence against everyone else. Women are extremely underrepresented in positions of power, which has a massive influence over society and how people treat each other and how people act. And women, female-dominated industries tend to be less paid than men. That doesn't mean that that's always set in stone and that will forever be true, and that there's nothing we can do about it and women are all helpless victims. It just means that that's what the system has been for the past God knows how long, and is a lot. And there's a lot of that still today, especially globally, probably less so in the UK and less so in Western countries, but it's still insidious. It's still there. There's still a lot of sexism. There's still a lot of...
Can I ask?
That's kind of all I'm saying. I'm not trying to reject men.
Sorry, can we have Tim, then Alex? Please, Tim, please challenge that.
As a men's rights activist, if feminism never existed, if we stayed as it was in the 1800s when women couldn't even vote and couldn't get divorced, marital rape was legal, would you still have, like, if it never existed today, would you still fight for men's rights because you just believe in them, period? Like, you believe in men having equal rights in terms of emotions, in terms of power, or is it just a reaction to feminism?
I would still fight for equality for sure, but what would the situation look like? Would there need to be a men's rights movement? That's a very good question. I don't know. I would fight for whatever is equal.
So technically, you would be fighting for what feminists did fight for.
Technically, that's
fight
true.
For women to have the right to vote.
Yes.
For no-fault divorce.
Yes. Well, no-fault divorce is tricky because that's tricky. But it depends. No-fault divorce in the States, and this is probably more of a semantical thing. The definition of no-fault divorce in the United States can take some very, very crazy turns depending on the state you're in. But in general, I would always take the egalitarian route. Yes. So I would always fight.
Sorry, can I just interject, please? Can we just this is a historical fact. Most men couldn't vote in the 1800s as well.
Sorry, I am aware of that. Property owning men. Yeah. Sorry.
I would always be in support of equal rights for all. So if I lived in a world where women couldn't vote or women couldn't own property, I would fight for the right for women to vote and own property.
It genuinely seems to me that you guys just don't like the term feminism. But
that's true. No. Well, yes and no. I don't like the things that feminists say and do. I agree with the definition of feminism. I don't agree.
But I don't agree that feminism is what it defines itself to be.
Yes, that's exactly. Yes, well put.
But Tim, you do agree with the definition of feminism as a concept.
You disappeared for a moment. Can you say that again, please?
You do agree with the concept of feminism by definition, not based on what some feminists have said.
Yes.
Yes, I would go along with that. I certainly agree in equality between the sexes, and I would choose a gender-neutral term rather than call it feminism.
Can I explain my position as to why it's called feminism? It's called feminism because being feminine was considered less because women had less.
In some ways, and it was considered more in other ways. And women were valued. Women were not subject to being slaughtered on battlefields.
Men not having the emotions that are not frustration and anger was seen as feminine, which is weak. Hence, feminism is for both men and women because feminism in the Western world is seen as weakness.
Yeah. But you see, you only see one side of the whole dynamic. You only see the feminist side. You're missing the other half of gender.
I don't like the way you're framing the argument.
Can we not attack the argument? Can we attack the argument, not the person, please?
Well,
Tim,
the framing is the argument, isn't it?
Why do you disagree with their points about feminism being valid? Because a lot of what's been discussed here, for example, has been about male mental health, domestic violence. I also must mention as well that if we look at actual domestic violence stats, lesbians have the highest rates of domestic violence. You can check that up. It's very much a legitimate fact. So, Tim, can you please make an actual point as to what you don't like about what Andrew and Alex have said.
So what I don't
it's
like,
the
is what I keep
Sorry, go
saying, what I'm hearing is half of gender reality. The male power, female victimization, half of gender reality. I'm hearing men more respected, but I'm not hearing women more loved. I'm not hearing the other half of gender reality. I'm only hearing an indoctrinated half.
I'm not
Men have the
indoctrinated.
power, women are the victims.
Well,
But you're not hearing
I
the other
want to
half.
again just reject the framing. We never said that. I've already forgotten what you said.
I'm a gender abolitionist myself. I don't even believe gender needs to exist anymore. But in the context not of gender ideology, because gender ideology is just, from my perspective, a right-wing talking point to discredit transgender people. It's gender. It's not an ideology. It's literally the way we're brought up. It's in the brain. That's literally the gender is the sense of self, right?
In your
Do you guys reject that?
Yeah.
In your opinion.
Others will say it's
Do you guys reject
biological.
that?
That it's biologically created. Don't you
No.
know that male and female brains are different morphologically,
No, they're not.
structurally, and neurochemically?
No, Alex, I have to say there is a physiological difference between the male and the female brain. I do agree with you in spirit, but I have to say there is a biological difference between the male and female body and nervous system and brain.
Yeah.
I do believe the difference you're referring to is that bigger brains, like literally the matter is bigger, right?
It's not just that.
That doesn't mean they're more intelligent.
I didn't say men are more intelligent.
I'm talking about women having brain language centers in both sides of the brain, where men only have on the left. I'm talking about structural differences. Males being more compartmentalized. There's and the neurochemical differences is big, and the physical. I mean, the corpus callosum that connects the two halves of the brain is
the corpus
callosum. You guys are here
for
biological essentialism.
Women, there's lots of differences.
Can I?
Hey, Tim, I got to ask you really fast. Tim, were you a sniper at any point?
No.
Because snipers are trained to hit the corpus callosum. Just gonna say.
Can I just make a general point? Can I just make a general point about I feel like there's a lot of anxiety against the idea that feminism is trying to crowd out and silence men's issues and male voices, right? And it's the kind of pendulum swing going the opposite direction. And you're saying it's an ideology that silences men and men's issues in favor of women and women's issues. Right. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So like I don't I basically don't see that myself. I can understand why you might think that, and I'm sure there's a lot of probably a lot of feminist discourse which is very pointed and very sort of
well, I suggest if you don't believe it, read The Myth of Male Power and see how much of that shows up in your feminist studies class.
Right.
No, I disagree. Look, I love Warren Farrell. He's great, but he wrote that book a long time ago. I'm interested in what happens on the streets today. So I would say
women find it difficult walking home alone at night. That's what happens today.
But I mean, I was more often attacked and suffer about twice the violence that women do.
By other men.
No, I was stabbed. Actually, this scar on my arm, which you probably can't see, was by a woman. Actually, no, it's not a very big scar because I jerked myself back, but I was stabbed walking home by a woman in 2020 during the BML riots in Los Angeles, July 4th, 2020, on 1817 Ivar Ave. I was attacked and followed home and stabbed by a woman.
I obviously don't think that should have happened.
No, I know that.
I'm hoping the woman had bad, like she got, like.
I hope she stepped. Right? I hope she stepped on a really, really nasty Lego one morning.
All right, so please, gentlemen, can we go back to the topic? So we've got 11 minutes left. So the overall views, what I'm hearing, and if I look at my notes, because I'm taking all the notes, is that basically a lot of you guys actually have similar concerns, because a lot of this, what we're talking about today, is about men, because obviously the panel here is largely male, and the topic is male privilege. So there's a lot of discussion here about men suffering and men's mental health and male domestic violence. And there's a lot of a kind of seems to be the main source of contention is feminism. On the one side, some people are saying that feminism is trying to acknowledge the suffering of women because men have always been prioritized. And then the other side is saying that actually we should be having egalitarianism. So we should be pro rights for both men and women. We shouldn't just be focusing on only one gender. So we've got 10 minutes left. So I think everyone now should just have some last closing thoughts or so before we start to come to the end.
Sounds good. Why don't you choose, why don't you take
Jana, you haven't spoken in a while. You say something, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just from what Andrew said, he said that the reason why you use the word feminist is because we've always heard men's side and we haven't heard women's side. So you want to hear the woman's side and so on. I don't really agree, because I would like to ask you, Andrew and Alex, do you really feel that men's issues, I mean, men's core issues, the fact that they are not able to be emotional or whatever, the core issues that you have experienced with masculinity, do you really feel like if those things are heard by society, do you really feel like if the issues that men face are being spoken about or were taken seriously under patriarchy? Because you said the problem was that patriarchy didn't listen to women or see the effects that it was having on women. That's what you said. And my thing is that patriarchy had extremely negative effects. What you call patriarchy and I call nature had very much negative effects on men as well. And I don't think that anybody listened to those problems either. We didn't listen to what the effects on patriarchy were on women. That's true. But we also didn't listen to what the effects of patriarchy were on men. The effects of patriarchy were on men, were really bad as well. You couldn't be emotional. You had to go to war. You had to die. You had to sacrifice your life. All the different things that men face today, this is still what you call patriarchy. I call nature, okay? It is okay. Affecting men as negatively. So my question is, why not? Again, this is a framing issue. This is a language issue. I think that most people here are egalitarian. Actually, I'm not egalitarian, but we are all arguing today as egalitarian. So I think everybody would agree with the term egalitarianism, so that we can include the perspective of men and not frame this as a woman's issue. The problem is that feminism and the word feminism has framed this entire issue as a woman's issue, has framed patriarchy as a men's thing, when actually these things come from nature. Men had issues with patriarchy, women had issues with patriarchy, everyone had issues with it. And yes, we need to change it. Yes, we need a more egalitarian world, but we don't need these labels. They are divisive. They silence people. They silence men. They're unproductive. So what I see and what I hear from both Alex and Andrew, from what I've heard today, is that basically y'all are egalitarian. And I don't have a problem with egalitarians. I have no problem with egalitarians. I accept the egalitarian view, although I don't consider myself to be an egalitarian, but I accept that view as valid and real, and I have no problem with that. But when we frame it as feminism, patriarchy, that's where the problem comes in. Sorry for talking so much. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Right, go on, Andrew. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think basically I'm just going to second most of what you said. I think ultimately we want egalitarianism. I think the irony is, from my perspective, feminism is the process of achieving that egalitarianism. I know you guys will fundamentally disagree with me on that, and that's obviously completely fine. I think egalitarianism, it's about like a lot of feminists talk about patriarchy does bring up how damaging it is to men, and I did say that as well. Patriarchy does damage men. Hypermasculine behavior is damaging to men's mental health. It's damaging to men's physical health when they have to go to war, when they have to work in certain jobs, be the breadwinner, all that stuff, right? Like, yes, patriarchy damages men too. That feminism's point is that it's damaging to men and women. But feminism specifically is more interested in women's priorities because from the feminist perspective, women are too often deprioritized in the conversation around general egality, like human experience, because so much because so many people in positions of power and in positions of influence are men, and therefore a lot of the conversation is typically about men and from male perspectives. So historically, feminism has fought to put women's voices and women's perspectives on the table in politics, in law, in science, in business, right? Like, that's the point of feminism. Feminism wouldn't exist if it wasn't about women. That's why it focuses on women specifically, but it's not doing so in the detriment of men. It's not trying to say women are more important than men, or men's issues are more important than men's issues. It's saying patriarchy is a problem. It damages men and women both. However, feminism needs to stand up for women's voices because they're too often, because of patriarchy, they're too often silenced. And that's the whole route to egalitarianism from the feminist perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, feminism is not when the feminists aren't doing it to spite men. The idea that they're trying to get back at us for some reason. It's just wanting equality, and I think, and we all do agree with the equality. Well, what's your name again? Women Against Feminism. What's the actual name? Jana. When you said nature, that made me think that this is basically not going to change because it's part of the way it's supposed to be.
It's half of nature. Human nature is more complex than just this. We also have parts of our nature that seek justice, that seek equality, but there is a part of human nature that seeks dominance, that does not seek equality. These are parts. We are selfish, but we're also caring.
Okay.
Jana, I gotta say, you really are brilliant. I would love to have you on my channel sometime. Like, you're smart as hell. I gotta say, like, you speak, like, you really are brilliant.
Right. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
Sure, tons. Yeah, you say that it's women's voices that are dimmed, diminished. In many realms, that's true. But in the realm of gender itself, women have almost all the voice. There's feminism on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's nothing. Only very recently have we just barely begun to hear what men think about these things. Male complaint, males having something to say about divorce, about
Tim,
everything that has to do
Sorry,
with
can you talk faster because we're
Tim, why didn't men in the 50s and 60s and 70s talk about it anyway before feminism?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. Like, does anyone have an answer? Like,
yeah, I do.
It just
because
seems it's reactionary.
All right, sorry, Alex, let him speak, please. Go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you speak faster?
Men had a code, a way of being, and women were. There's a wheel of complicity that goes round and round, whereby man applies a force of influence upon woman, and in turn, woman applies her force of influence upon man. See, one of the things I'll object to is that you're infantilizing women. You think women were not involved. You think women were not half the force of influence in everything that happened. The problem with your idea of patriarchy is then all fault is male, all blame is male, but then all credit is male too.
Didn't say that.
I think that's
if you do not allow that female power and force of influences, then you're not going to hold women accountable for their half of the force of influence that created this world, including the gender system. So then they're just infantilized. Women just are powerless pawns under patriarchy. Well, wrong. It was never that way.
We never said anything like that.
Yeah, literally, that's just a straw man. You've just straw manned the answer.
No, I think the point is that basically the idea is that feminism tends to view, if I may, this system as men have always had all of the power and men built the whole world, and it seems that we don't actually hear about the feminine contributions, such as the Vestal Virgins, such as the position of nuns, such as women who worked as governesses, such as women in textiles, such as women who were involved in nursing, which was heavily female-dominated, female-oriented. We actually tend to hear that the whole world was basically a world was all for men and men had all this power, there's a lot of talk about hypermasculinity. I think that's the point he's trying to make, and that women, the feminist position seems to not acknowledge that women always had a contribution and that women had just as much power as men. It's just that the power was not power. It was a different kind of power, and that the feminist position, and this isn't me saying my opinion, I'm saying the feminist position.
No, that's
you'd have to tell that to the women of
I agree insofar, yes, I accept that point. Women are not, I accept the point from Tim that women are not powerless. Women have not historically never had any power, and women are not children, and women are not helpless victims. I totally accept all of those points, Tim. I do accept them. But it's a system built to prioritize and reward men in positions of political influence and financial influence and physical dominance. That's the system.
Okay.
I see. I have to say the system. I have to say the system is built. The system. I have to say the system is built to favor women. The system is built to favor girls and women at all stages.
Blatantly not true.
It is true. It is true. It is very true.
It's equally true to what you're saying.
If you're in the UK, if you're in London and you go to a bank in London and you're applying for a job and you're a 22-year-old man and a 22-year-old woman, exactly the same resume, same backgrounds, they will pick the woman just because she's a woman.
Yeah, you're talking about today, but like if you look globally, if you look historically, if you talk about most positions in most industries are male dominated and favor men.
Like, but we're not alive. But it's not. It's today.
Times likely to die.
Today.
Yeah, even today, globally, and in most industries and most societies, most higher paid industries and most industries of higher.
You're talking about 50 years ago.
Patriarchy is literally what is part of what Andrew said. It's for the idea, the concept of a specific kind of man. I'm a victim of patriarchy because I'm not that specific type of man, and it makes me feel guilty because I suffer from what I call in feminist literature toxic masculinity, not being able to be my full self. That's patriarchy making me feel like that, not individual men. It's the system, not you two. All of the men here are not making me feel like I can't be like fully like emotional.
Right,
and that's that I live in. It's the societal feeling that just surrounds everyone, that men need to be a certain way and women need to be a certain way.
And it's men.
I don't consider that nature like Yanni does. I don't think
women are involved.
It is men's rights activists. It is men's rights activists who say that as a man you should be able to truly express yourself. But let me ask you: are you telling me that if you were going for a promotion in a company in the UK, and the HR representative who was in charge of choosing the person who was being promoted, if you knew that person was a feminist, do you think as a white man you would be treated fairly in that circumstance? Do you think that as a white man your chance of being promoted is equal and fair?
To an extent, yes. I don't think they would discriminate against me.
But to an extent, no?
Well, not 100%, because I have no idea who the person is. Like, this is a hypothetical.
Haven't you ever heard of...
looking at this in a very
wait a minute. Haven't you ever heard of affirmative action or quotas or...
Yes, I have, yeah.
2027 female-centric
Tim, let me tell you, the UK is...
Why do you interrupt me?
I don't mean to. I'm just saying it's even worse in the UK than it is here.
All right, I think we're going to have to finish now.
All right.
We're going to close up.
It's been a lovely chat, guys. It's been a lovely chat.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And I will be live again next week with somebody else. My name is The Rational Female. Thank you very much and goodbye.